Thank you so much for providing me with the opportunity to join you this morning, and I really regret that I can't be there in person. I think many of you whom I've met know how proud I am to have been involved with Globe for years, and I know what a tremendous job Globe does bringing together legislators from around the world to jointly explore and address some of the most challenging international environmental issues of our time. I really enjoy being part of that, and it'll be fun to be there with you. I'd particularly like to thank Prime Minister Fukuda for his leadership on global climate change and his persistence in keeping this issue front and center in the minds of the leaders of the G8+5 nations. His Cool Earth 50 proposal is really an important strategic roadmap for Japan and all other nations working to address climate change. I know you've also heard from my good friend Tony Blair this morning. He also is doing remarkable work bringing together a broad set of players to achieve agreement on a post-2012 climate change framework, and I commend him on his extraordinary efforts. The message that I'd like to share with you today is really a very simple one. It's the same message that I brought to the climate change negotiations last December in Bali, but even more reinforced than it was then. The fact is, there is real movement on this issue in the United States of America, and I believe we're ready to lead again. In Bali, I spoke with delegates from 7 delegations, including the EU, China, Japan, Australia, and small island states. And I also spoke at our environmental community's gathering. Everywhere I went, I basically said the same thing, and that is that in the United States, really exciting things are happening. And even though the administration isn't doing or saying what it ought to be, the fact is that at the grassroots level of America, people get it and people are moving. Over 500 mayors across our country have pledged to meet or beat Kyoto commitments in their cities. Hundreds of U.S. corporations, including industry giants like General Electric, Duke Energy, Dow, DuPont, and Florida Power and Light, many of whom I know are with you today, they're all clamoring for mandatory climate change policy. And they want it because they know that to have certainty in our economy about carbon and carbon reductions is to, in effect, move the marketplace in the right direction and to create a certainty for them in that marketplace. Now you have 5 Midwestern states that last year joined 10 Northeastern and 6 Western states in a launching of a regional emissions trading program to cap their output of greenhouse gases. I hope you hear clearly what I'm saying. That means that between the East Coast, the central part of our country, and the West Coast, you have over half of the American economy that has voluntarily put itself under mandatory reductions. The world needs to know this White House doesn't represent the American people today on the subject of global climate change, and it will not represent America's policy beyond January of 2009. Even in spite of the hurdles that the administration has put in front of us, and they've been persistent, I want to highlight the fact that the Bali roadmap that was developed last December really does mark progress towards a post-Kyoto vision. It lays out a process for future negotiations. It recognizes the importance of 4 building blocks in order to fight climate change: mitigation, adaptation, financing, and technology. And most importantly, it shows us a path to be able to reach a final agreement in Copenhagen in 2009. The G8 meeting here in Japan next month will provide us with a very important stepping stone. And frankly, it's up to all of us to make that path productive. We're starting down that road now in the United States Senate. Just earlier this month, many of you may have heard, we brought a very important piece of climate change legislation to the floor of the Senate, and it would have reduced greenhouse gas emissions by about 65% by mid-century. Although we were defeated on the floor, the debate was nevertheless a very important marker of real progress. The last time we had a vote on climate change in the Senate, we got about 38 votes. That was several years ago. This time, as a snapshot of a single moment in time, We got 48 votes of the 60 that you need to bring the bill to a vote. But most importantly, we had several presidential candidates who were not here at the time and several other supportive senators who were not able to make the vote. So if you add them in, we actually have more like 54 senators out of the 60 needed who support serious action to address global climate change. 5 years ago, when Congress last considered a cap and trade bill, I think we had maybe 43 votes. So the tide is moving upwards, 38, 43, now 54, and it is turning in our favor. Here's the bottom line, and it's really exciting to a lot of us. No matter who wins this year's presidential campaign, and you know I have opinions about who should, the next president will be a supporter of cap and trade. And every one of us understands how important presidential leadership is on this issue. Next time is going to be different. Next time in the House and Senate, we're going to have a president of the United States who's prepared to leverage the office and lead the country to this position, meet with the business people, and help us be able to pass the legislation. And of the 46 senators who opposed action this time, 4 are retiring and 15 are up for re-election. So I believe we're going to see new faces in the next Congress, and we're going to need to make sure that they support cap and trade. The other side, those who oppose this, are obviously working against the issue. And it's no surprise that those voting against this legislation took an average of 3 times as much money from the oil companies as those who are supporting the legislation. So we need to make this a major issue in our campaigns, in our races all across America this November. I'm absolutely convinced that we will. There is no better way to get the attention of a politician than to put their job security on the line, and there's no better way to do that than by making climate change a major voting issue in November in the United States. So the bill that we tried to pass may have died temporarily, but I want to underscore to you the motivation to address climate change in the United States is more than alive and kicking. The voices of dozens of governors, hundreds of CEOs of major companies, millions of citizens are all making themselves heard. And people are doing extraordinary things at the grass level, from changing their light bulbs to changing their habits about use of energy, to employing new energy efficiency standards, to doing audits on their homes, their schools, their workplaces. There is an enormous revolution that we're just on the cusp of. And I'm very confident that a lot of businesses are going to make a lot of money as they appeal to this new understanding that exists in the United States. Next time, next year, when we have a new president, I guarantee you the next president will have absolutely no choice but to listen to that grassroots movement. So thank you for your time. Thanks for letting me join you today just to share with you a little bit of what is happening here in our country. I know many of you have been ahead of us. You've taken the lead. We respect that and we appreciate it. And we're grateful to those of you who've been patient. But we all have critically important work to do to make up for the time that's been lost. And as the science comes back, it is coming back faster and to a greater degree than any of those scientists originally predicted. To me, that's perhaps the most compelling thing of all. We're now celebrating the 20th anniversary of Jim Hansen of NASA testifying before the Congress and telling us then, 20 years ago, that global climate change was happening and it was going to continue to grow. He was right, and all of the scientists of the IPCC have been right, and leaders around the world who've been sounding the alarm bells have been right. I look forward to our continued collaboration so that all of us get it right and respond on time. Thank you very, very much.